Greetings from the land of Fahrul. For the King from Iron Oak Games is a roguelike tabletop adventure game. It is designed for up to a party of 3 players to venture forth into one of 5 different adventures and try to defeat the challenges contained therein. In today's video, we're going to tackle a very commonly asked question. What characters should I have on my team? Before we can answer this question, we must first understand the different skills that make up characters in For the King. One of the most important character skills to understand are the character's primary stats: strength, vitality, intelligence, awareness, talent, and speed. In For the King, each stat skill plays an important role in the game. Similar to classic Dungeons & Dragons, the game will put the characters through unique challenges and into combat against a host of different creatures. Each challenge will require 1 or more die rolls to determine if the character was or wasn't successful with a challenge. Those die rolls will test a character on a scale from 1 to 100 against one of these stats listed here. For example, the Scholar displayed on the left side here has a strength stat of 42. On a 100% scale, this means the Scholar would succeed on die rolls that test his strength only 42% of the time. His intelligence, though, is 78, represented by the brain symbol, the third one. So encounters that will test his intelligence will have a 78% chance for each roll to be successful. It also just so happens to be above 49, so as a bonus, the Scholar will start the game with 1 magic resist point, which acts like magic armor. As indicated here, for characters with strength stats that are greater than 49, those characters will start the game with 1 point of physical armor. This is similar to the Scholar's benefit based on intelligence. Each stat has its own unique benefits. Vitality determines a character's overall health points. The higher their vitality, the more health points they'll have. Intelligence, like strength, if greater than 49, will result in the character gaining 1 free magic resist point from the start of the game. If at any point a character increases their strength or intelligence from below 49 to 50 or above, they'll instantly gain this benefit. Awareness is primarily used to keep characters safe from being ambushed while wandering the lands of Fahrul. The more awareness you have, the less likely you'll be ambushed. Talent is a skill primarily used for loots. Loots act like magical weapons in the game. Talent is also needed for handling ships at sea. Your talent will therefore affect your boat movement during the game. Speed is a very important skill. First, it is the primary skill for determining movement on land. It is also going to factor into combat by affecting a character's evasion, or essentially their ability to dodge attacks, as well as to determine a character's combat initiative. With that quick review of character skills, let's take a deep dive into a character's special abilities. About halfway down on the character's info sheet, you'll find a list of their special abilities. Each character has something unique to bring to your team. As you can see here, on the left, a woodcutter has an elite skill to bash down doors, as well as a passive skill called Justice. I'll leave it to the viewer to learn more about what each one of these special abilities does. We're going to basically go on here and break these different abilities down into a ranked list. This is a table that lists all 21 character special abilities that are all currently available to characters in the game. What we're doing here is we're breaking this list down into 5 categories that we have on the left-hand side, which essentially is what value those abilities bring. The first category is those that bring essentially 1 focus worth of value to your team. And this is dedicated to a specific ability. So for example, Elite Flee is essentially equal to 1 less roll check when fleeing, which is essentially equal to 1 dedicated focus for the purpose of fleeing a combat. This second one is on its own an ability called Refocus. Refocus is an undedicated value of 1 focus. So it's a little bit more valuable than the ones above because it can be used for any purpose, but essentially its value is equal to 1 focus. These character abilities provide benefits during combat. Some are defensive, helping to reduce damage taken, while others improve the damage your character can deal to an enemy. These abilities provide either direct gold income to your character or party, or provide items and loot to the party, which, if sold, essentially represent gold. Lastly, this unique ability, Inspire, provides passive experience point gain for party members. So these are the basic 5 categories of value that we've ranked them in. On the right-hand side, we've taken each one of these 25 abilities and put them into 2 separate categories. One which ranks them based upon the benefit they provide to the team, and the second column which is ranked by those that provide benefits only to the character and not to the team. So at the top of the list, Encourage, Entertain, and Distraction. Those are the top 3 abilities that benefit the team. And then for the second column, Refocus, Justice, Called Shot. Those are the top 3 abilities that benefit the character that actually has that skill or that ability. Finally, over here on the right, we've taken all 21 abilities and ranked them based upon our opinion of their value. At the top of the list, Encourage, Entertain, and Distraction from the team groupings, followed by Refocus and Justice. Refocus and Justice are 2 very, very valuable abilities that don't necessarily benefit the team, but they are just so good, we rank them fairly high. So you can take a look at this list and evaluate for yourself whether or not you agree or disagree with our rankings of these abilities. But we're going to move on with this assumption that these are the values of these abilities that characters may have in the game. So, some factors you should consider when you're choosing your team. Is every character's stat represented on the team? And do they have at least a score of 65? So what we're talking about there is when you choose characters, let's say we have a woodcutter, a blacksmith, and a monk. Does every stat get represented by at least 65 amongst all 3 characters? So for example, the highest strength stat among these 3 characters comes from the woodcutter on the left with 78. The highest vitality comes from the blacksmith in the center at 80. The highest intelligence comes from the monk at 74. Awareness is covered best by the woodcutter. Talent is covered best by the blacksmith. And finally, the speed stat. The greatest speed stat among these 3 is the monk at 60. This is not a good team. Good teams generally have a score of at least 65 in each one of these stats. So when you are choosing a different group or combination of characters, it is usually really important to make sure that you have every one of these stats covered with that score of at least 65. So 60 is just horribly low, especially since it's the top score among 3 characters. This team is incredibly slow. It would mean that characters are going to be not very good at moving across the land. They're going to fail their speed, their movement rolls quite a bit. They're also going to have very low combat initiative, allowing enemies to attack them before they get a chance to attack back. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Another factor to consider is, do your characters bring to the table good abilities that support the team? So let's take a look at another combination of characters: the blacksmith, the trapper, and an herbalist. Does it pass the first test? So looking at the stats, we do have, in fact, every stat covered with at least a score in the 70s. So this effectively looks like a pretty good starting team. But then let's take a look at what abilities they bring. So taking a look at the column on the right-hand side, the overall ranking, the top skill brought to this team is Party Heal from the Herbalist, followed by Gather Herbs, also from the Herbalist. Steady comes from the Blacksmith, and then Elite Trap Disarm, Elite Ambush, and Counterattack are rounding it up from the Sender character, which I believe was the Hunter. That's relatively low. I would love to have a team that can cover those stats but provide a lot better abilities than these here. Most of these are actually on the lower end of the rank scale, on the bottom half of the scale. Finally, the final factor to consider is your character the best fit for the role you plan to use it in? So, for example, maybe you are planning on having a character that's going to deliver raw damage. You also want a character that evades attacks but can provide consistent damage. Maybe you're planning on having a character whose primary role is to be a team support character that provides buffs or debuffs to the enemy. Or maybe some kind of combination between a support character and a damage dealer. Maybe you want to have a character that acts like the prototypical tank, either a physical tank against physical damage that can absorb physical attacks, or a tank versus magic damage that can absorb magical attacks. Often, physical tanks use the taunt skill in For the King. Finally, maybe you want a character whose primary role is to be a moneymaker for your team that uses a lot of skills that multiply gold as the team gets loot throughout the game. Let's compare each character for their primary role. So here we're going to compare the characters that have the best strength in the game and identify from these which character probably would fulfill the role of a strength character better than any other. So let's start with the woodcutter on the left. The primary role of the character is the strength stat. So the woodcutter comes in at 78, the blacksmith 76, the monk 74. If I was only evaluating these characters just on their primary role stat, the woodcutter would be the winner. However, anytime you're evaluating a set of characters, you want to evaluate 4 stats. The first being the primary stat that they're going to be fulfilling. So in this case, strength roll, strength stat. However, you should always evaluate their speed as the second most important skill to evaluate. So looking at these, the woodcutter has a speed of 58, the blacksmith a speed of 56, and the monk a speed of 60. So the monk is actually the winner here with respect to speed, although only by 2 points. But when you compare the monk's strength to the woodcutter's strength, there's a 4 strength difference there. That's probably a wash. I wouldn't mind sacrificing 4 strength to gain 2 speed potentially. But let's keep going. The next most important stat that you want to evaluate for a character is their vitality. This is going to determine how healthy they are, how much hit points that character has. The woodcutter has a very respectable 75 vitality, represented by the heart symbol, which is the second symbol on the left. The blacksmith has the highest vitality of any character in the game at 80, so he's definitely the overall winner when it comes to vitality. The monk has a vitality of 62. That's below 65. That's relatively low. In general, the woodcutter is coming in second place here for vitality at a very, very respectable 75, and the blacksmith is definitely coming in on the top. The fourth skill that you would typically want to evaluate is the talent of the character. Now, the talent is the second to last skill. The woodcutter comes in at 52 in talent, the blacksmith at 72, and the monk at 48. Talent is basically used for boat movement. So this is going to give you an idea as to how well this character is going to be able to handle boat movement once your team gets to using boats throughout the game. So evaluating those, I usually evaluate them based on their primary stat first, in which case the woodcutter is the standout winner at 78, followed by speed, in which case the woodcutter comes in at second place, followed by vitality, in which case the woodcutter again comes in at second place, and then followed by talent, in which case he comes in again at second place. The blacksmith, other than their speed, which is at 56, which is very, very poor, the blacksmith represents fairly well. 76 strength, 80 vitality, which is number one, and 72 talent, which is also number one. But that speed is pretty low. Taking a look at the types of skills that these three characters bring, Justice is the most valuable one, which comes from the woodcutter, followed by Party Heal and Discipline, which both come from the monk, and Steady, which comes from the blacksmith. So if I'm comparing the blacksmith to the woodcutter, Justice, we feel, is a much more valuable ability than Steady. So that might give me a little bit more weight to choosing a woodcutter over a blacksmith just based on their ability. Now, there is one other character that we want to throw into the mix when it comes to evaluating characters for their strength. And so I've replaced the center character here with the busker. The busker is primarily intended to be a talent character, so you'll notice that the busker's talent of 76 is his highest score because he's intended to be a talent character. However, he does have a respectable secondary stat, which is his strength at 72. Now, that's less than the monk, it's less than the woodcutter, but it's still respectable. One of the things that makes the busker potentially useful is the abilities that the busker brings to the table. He comes with Elite Flee, Entertain, and Distraction. If the busker can fulfill the role of strength well enough, bringing in those additional abilities of Entertain and Distraction, which appear very, very high on our overall rank list, that character may actually provide a lot of benefit to your team. So don't count out the busker when it comes to fulfilling the strength role on a team. Now let's take a look at those characters that fulfill the intelligence role on the team. So what we have here are the scholar, the herbalist, and the monk. Now the primary stat that we want to evaluate would be intelligence. So starting on the left, the scholar is the overall leader with 78 intelligence, followed by the herbalist with 76 and the monk with 74. The second most important stat is to evaluate speed. And interestingly enough, the scholar comes in at 70, which is the number one slot here. The herbalist coming in at 64 and the monk coming in at 60. We would then also want to evaluate their vitality. The scholar comes in at 60, herbalist at 52, which is extremely low, and the monk at 62, which is a little bit better than the scholar. And then finally, we would want to evaluate them for their boat movement on talent. The scholar comes in at 70, which is very good. The herbalist at 58, which is poor, and the monk, which is 48, which is very, very poor. Overall, just based on the stats alone, the scholar with a 78 intelligence, a 70 speed, and a 70 talent far and away seems to be one of the better characters amongst the three here. But in addition to evaluating their stats, we also want to take a look at what abilities they bring to the table. The scholar has an ability called Refocus. The herbalist has Party Heal, as does the monk, so they both share that same ability. The herbalist also brings Gather Herbs, and the monk brings Discipline. If we take a look at those on the rank table, Refocus is ranked higher than Party Heal. It's ranked higher than Discipline, and it's ranked higher than Gather Herbs. So not only is the scholar winning just based on the stats alone, the scholar is also winning here based on the value of the ability the scholar is bringing to the table. Now, Party Heal, just one little thing I want to mention about Party Heal. Many people value Party Heal higher on this list than we're putting right now, and that's because Party Heal is an important skill. However, Party Heal is also a skill that can be picked up from an item within the game, and those items are fairly easy to pick up. Very early on in the game, there are items like a knotted staff, or a white lute, or a pipe diffuser. Those items can provide your team with Party Heal without having to have it built into a character. So if you were to, for example, purchase a knotted staff right at the very beginning of the game and provided it to your scholar would then end up having both refocus and party heal right from the beginning of the game. Whereas getting a weapon like that for a monk or an herbalist would not add any additional value to your team. Let's take a look at the characters that are primarily intended to satisfy the awareness role on a team. So these are typically hunters, trappers, folks that use bows and such. The awareness stat is the one with the eyeball. It's the fourth one from the left. And the hunter starts out at 78, the trapper at 76, and the treasure hunter at 74. So the hunter is definitely the leader in the primary stat. We would also want to double check their speed. Hunter comes in at another 78, which is the highest speed of any character in the game, by the way. The trapper comes in at 74. And the treasure hunter comes in at a very, very poor 58. So right now, the hunter is number one in awareness and also number one in speed. Let's take a look at their vitality. The hunter comes in at 66, the trapper at 60, and the treasure hunter at 56. Again, the hunter is coming in at number one in vitality. And then the last stat is the boat movement stat for talent. The hunter comes in at 64, which is just about on that borderline of being respectable. Trapper at 72 and treasure hunter at 74, which is the best. But to be honest with you, a hunter at number one in its primary attribute of 78 for awareness, 78 for speed, and 68 for vitality really gives the hunter here an overall boost in comparison with these characters. Let's also, though, evaluate their special abilities. The hunter comes with 4 abilities. Why so many? Well, many of these abilities value basically represents just one focus. So there's not a whole lot of value to all these extra abilities. Called Shot would be probably the one ability on the hunter that we would want to take a look at and compare to the other characters. The Trapper, Elite Ambush, Elite Trap Disarm. Again, these are one focus in value, not particularly great. The Treasure Hunter, Mimic Whisperer, and Find Treasure. Both of those abilities essentially are going to be providing gold benefits to your team. So if gold is one of the things that you're most interested in, that would be something to look at. Let's compare them based on their overall rank on their abilities that they bring to the table. We're kind of on the lower half of the list of the ranked here. Mimic Whisper and Find Treasure from the Treasure Hunter are coming in just a little bit ahead of Called Shot, which comes from the Hunter. And then, of course, you can see those at the bottom that essentially represent about one focus worth of value. Overall, I'd probably rank the Hunter as my primary character here for fulfilling the awareness slot. And finally, let's take a look at those characters that can handle the talent role. We have the Minstrel, the Busker, and once again, the Treasure Hunter. The Treasure Hunter seems to be someone who's intended to cover multiple stats, intelligence, awareness, and talent, all at 74, so something as kind of a jack of all trades. Unfortunately, many times the jack of all trades is not good at any of them. Just sort of can get by with each one of those. But let's take a look at the Minstrel first. The Minstrel's primary stat here is talent. Comes in at 78, which is the highest of any available. The Busker comes in at 76, and the Treasure Hunter at 74. The next thing we want to look at is speed. And the Minstrel comes in at 66, and the Busker at 58, the Treasure Hunter also at 58. So 66 is also number one in comparison to those other characters that fulfill the talent role. Vitality, The Minstrel actually comes in very, very bad at 50 vitality. This is the lowest vitality of any character in the game. So that in and of itself could dissuade some people from choosing the Minstrel, although we'll talk about that a little bit later. Finally, you'd also want to reevaluate talent. Once again, talent is also used for boat movement, and of course, the Minstrel coming in at 78 is definitely going to be your best character with respect to boat movement. Overall, I would say the Minstrel and the Busker compare relatively favorably with respect to their stats. The Busker's vitality of 68 compared to the Minstrel's vitality of 50 gives the Busker an edge, whereas the Minstrel's speed of 66 compared to the Busker's speed of 58 kind of gives the Minstrel the edge. Let's take a look at the abilities that these characters bring to the table. We actually have the top 3 skills or abilities listed here. Encourage comes from the Minstrel. Entertain and Distraction come from the Busker. Inspire comes also from the Minstrel. So when trying to compare what character I would want to fulfill the role of my talent character, the Minstrel or the Busker, almost either one of these would be pretty good. Again, the Treasure Hunter comes in with Mimic Whisperer and Find Treasure, just relatively mediocre on the overall rank list, and he's mediocre on most of his skills. So I'd probably give the edge just slightly to the Minstrel because his primary talent of 78 is what we're looking for. So, based on our discussions and our overall evaluation of each character fulfilling its role, let's take a look at what an ideal team might look like. So let's say I wanted to grab a character to fulfill the intelligence role. So I'm going to grab the winner from that group, which is the Scholar. I'll put them first on the list. I'm going to go ahead and choose the Minstrel as my winner for the talent group. And the reason I'm going to include the Minstrel is I really want to have a very, very high talent stat. And I also like speed. Speed a little bit more than vitality. He also comes with Encourage and Inspire, which are 2 very, very good abilities. So let's just throw in the Minstrel there. And now we have to choose which character as our third character. And we have either strength characters to pick from or awareness characters to pick from. So let's start out by choosing the winner of the strength group, which was the Woodcutter. So this would be our recommended team number 1. You should do fairly well with a team like this. Now let's evaluate this team. Does it meet our 3 requirements? Does it have every stat covered? And in fact, it does have every stat covered, most of them in the 70s, so that's really, really good. What set of abilities does this team bring to the table? Well, we have Encourage, Refocus, Justice, and Inspire. So we've got 4 abilities out of the top 6. That's pretty good. So that is an effective team that you can run in For the King. Now let's take a look at replacing that center character with our winner from the awareness group, which was the Hunter. So we have Scholar, Hunter, Minstrel. How do they meet our first check? Well, actually, we have a problem here. This team does not satisfy the strength stat at all. In fact, they're very, very poor. So that's probably not a good team to go with. You definitely want to make sure that you have every stat covered at least 65 or better. So if we are going to continue to work with a Hunter, we're going to have to make a modification to either the Minstrel or the Scholar. So let's say that the Minstrel just barely won his competition with the Busker. Let's replace the Minstrel with the Busker. Keep the Hunter and keep the Scholar. How do we do now with our stat checks? And that Busker bringing 72 strength to the team satisfies that and actually gives us a slight boost to the vitality score as well. So this is another team that you could run successfully in For the King, a Scholar, a Hunter, and a Busker, and you should do fairly well. Let's take a look at what abilities this team brings to the table. So with the busker added, you now have entertain and distraction on the team, as well as refocus from the scholar. And then called shot and everything below called shot, that comes from the hunter. At least you have 3 of the top 5 abilities in the game included with those characters. So that was our recommended team. Here's another example of let's keep the minstrel on the right hand side instead of the busker, and let's replace the scholar with the second place intelligence character, which was the monk. How about this team? Does it meet our first check of all stats being covered? And the answer to that is yes. We do now have all stats covered with this team of monk, hunter, and minstrel. If we take a look at the abilities this team brings, we do have encourage from the minstrel and inspire from the minstrel, party heal and discipline from the monk, and again, everything from called shot on down is from the hunter. This is a respectable team, and that can also be used successfully if you want to run that team in For the King. So that's essentially how you would want to go through the process of choosing what kind of team to put together. What skills are you trying to bring to the team? Do they fulfill the role that you want it to fulfill? The last thing we're going to show you is what is basically considered the meta right now, which is the team used by some of the best players in the game right now. And that team is a scholar followed with a busker fulfilling the strength role and the minstrel. Now, we talked about the busker earlier, that although his strength is not the highest of any of the strength characters, he does bring very, very good special abilities to the team. If you were to run the scholar, busker, and minstrel, does it fulfill our requirements? So yes, we do have strength, vitality. All of these stats are covered at 65 or better. If you take a look at their abilities, though, you actually now bring 5 of the top 6 abilities combined into one team. And that is primarily why that team is considered the meta. So, thank you for taking a look at our video. I'd like to give a special shout out to Sheldon1994 and Gigi Maples and Smile for contributing to this video. And please go ahead and throw a like on there. And if you do use Discord, come join us out on the For the King Discord. We're out there all the time. Thank you for joining me. Have a great one.